let's talk about the Bodhisattva path in Mahayana Buddhism. So Bodhisattva means an awakened being. Bodhi meaning awake or awakened, and sattva being being or sentient being. So in Mahayana Buddhism, this is the path that the practitioners, the laypersons, the monastics, they all are on, is the Bodhisattva path, whether they are just beginning or taking the formal vows of a Bodhisattva. But what does that mean, right? Well, let me take a step back here. So Shakyamuni Buddha is the Buddha of our era. He is one who has discovered the teachings on his own and went ahead and taught it to the rest of us. So we are under his umbrella right now of teachings, is Shakyamuni Buddha. He's the full Buddha of our era. Now there are three paths that are actually can be taken inside Buddhism. There's that of the solitary Buddha, one who becomes a Buddha but does not actually teach. There's also that of the Arhat, and this is what you see traditionally inside the Buddhist teachings and his sermons, where he had numerous Arhats, which was his followers, and many of them became enlightened beings, Arhats, and so they achieve Nirvana, and they escape the cycle of birth and death, samsara. So Arhats are not a Buddha, but they've achieved awakening, enlightenment, and realized Nirvana, and so they've escaped the cycle of birth and death. And then there's the third path, which is that of Buddhahood, basically. So it's the Bodhisattva Path. So it's not stopping at the Arhat ideal, but it's going beyond that. So it's going, well, we need to go become Bodhisattvas so we can achieve Buddhahood, to become Buddhas. And so even in Theravada, this is recognized. So it's recognized that to become a Bodhisattva and become a Buddha, yeah, that would be fantastic. And we even look for both traditions, looking to the Buddha's past lives. He was a Bodhisattva numerous times, countless times, as a human being, animals, etc., where he helped numerous sentient beings. So there's a difference between like a fully awakened enlightened bodhisattva and then regular or unenlightened bodhisattvas, and that's a good example. In his prior lives, he was not awakened or enlightened, but he was a practicing bodhisattva in all those prior existences. So even in Theravada, it is recognized, but it's usually reserved for exceptional beings. And so that's kind of like the little differentiation right there. So obviously, they are following the Arhat ideal. That's the path that we're getting from the sermons, and that's what is actually being taken. Now in Mahayana, we have Mahayana Sutras, which go a step beyond that. They're like, okay, yes, the Buddha did teach that, but it's also teaching to become an actual Buddha, because even upon the Buddha's awakening, he was like, all sentient beings can do exactly what he did. He expounded that, and that's in both canons of Buddhism. And so, yes, we can become Buddhas, but just like the Buddha, that was a very long path. So if you look at the Buddhist followers who became Arhats, that happened in their lifetime, right? Whereas the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, he went through countless lifetimes, eons, until he actually achieved that level. So do you essentially want to escape samsara in this lifetime, or become a full Buddha and go through countless more lifetimes, right? And so that's why essentially the Arhat ideal is promoted a lot in Theravada. Not that it's selfish or anything else like that, because there's lots of compassion and everything else inside Theravada. It's a wonderful tradition, but it's focusing right on that compared to Mahayana. It's like, we're going to continue until you become like an actual enlightened bodhisattva and progress on towards becoming an actual Buddha. So a good analogy or simile of this is, imagine a burning house, and this is actually from Buddhist sermons as well. So imagine a burning house. Do you want to stay inside a burning house or get out of it? So basically a burning house is kind of like an analogy for samsara. So no, I want to get out of that burning house. And so that's the Arhat ideal. Let's get out of the house. Hey, come on people, let's get out of here, right? Now the Bodhisattva path, the Mahayana ideal is, like, it's a little more complicated or nuanced here, but essentially is that when you achieve a certain realization inside Mahayana as a Bodhisattva, is that house really on fire or not on fire? Or can you actually go in and out of that house almost like a firefighter, essentially, all in protective garb? So basically there's kind of two paths right here. We have the Buddhist teachings giving us liberation in many different paths. So it's really what we call in Mahayana skillful means. So Mahayana very much is the core tenet or concept of Mahayana is skillful means, skill and means. And so basically different ways to achieve enlightenment, awakening, right? And so getting out of that burning house, Absolutely, the Buddha gave us the teachings. He's like, what's going on now? There's even examples inside the Buddhist teachings where a father is trying to tell his children to get out of this burning house, like, hey, I got some toys here for you and stuff like that. And he kind of lures them outside that burning house. Just like us, we're unaware of that burning house. So there's different ways that, based upon our level of realization and understanding, to help us achieve awakening, enlightenment, basically. So the difference is, when we talk about the Bodhisattva path, that in Mahayana, the ideal is not to just stay as an arhat. Basically, you're escaping the cycle of birth and death. You're done. Okay. The ideal is, you can do that, but you know what? How about let's become actual Buddhas? Because there's something called bodhicitta, or basically, essentially, awakened mind, or just this aspiration for becoming an actual Buddha. Buddhahood is what drives those in Mahayana Buddhism, is to become an actual Buddha out of this great sense of compassion. Now remember, there's compassion in both branches. That's not in dispute here. It's kind of like this overall goal to become a Buddha, to expound out more deeply and widely. And so even in Theravada, there's just in our regular world right now, helping different communities, people, etc. So it's not saying like compassion is not in one or the other. It's just the ideal. So basically, the arhat, you're outside the cycle of birth and death. So you're no longer able to help anybody if you escape that. Whereas inside the Bodhisattva path, the goal is we're still continue on, get to eventually awaken, enlighten Bodhisattva level, and then eventually become an actual Buddha, where we can now go and expound the teachings and help sentient beings on a much wider scale. So that's really honestly the big difference between the two. And not saying like one is better than the other. It's just that is the path. And so it may sound a little weird. Like, so well, wait a minute. If they're enlightened, awakened beings, whether that's a Bodhisattva or even a Buddha, how are they still continuing on this cycle of rebirth, birth and death, samsara? And so this really is going to be a little differentiation between the two branches here. But again, actually all of these kind of overlap to various degrees. Again, it's not like one has these teachings and the other one doesn't. Yes, we do have Mahayana Sutras, but essentially it's just different interpretations of the Buddha's past lives, the teachings, etc. So there's something called non-abiding Nirvana inside Mahayana Buddhism. And so this, you can find this to some degree inside Theravada as well, but it's not really practiced that much. So basically the Nirvana that we have inside Theravada is basically, remember that burning house? You're outside the house? Nirvana. You're no longer consumed by the fires of greed, anger, delusion. You're no longer caught in the cycle of rebirth, samsara. You no longer have the dukkha in your life. That's gone. You're inside Nirvana. You're on to the other shores. As a very famous explanation inside Buddhism, we're crossing that river to get to the other shore, the shore of Nirvana, right? You're on that shore, you're done. You are now in Nirvana, in our world. You've achieved that state. You're no longer consumed, right? And when you die, Parinirvana, you're outside the cycle of birth and death. It's done. Now inside Mahayana, there's something called non-abiding nirvana. And so basically it goes into another Mahayana concept of emptiness. So basically when we talk about samsara, cycle of birth and death, and also nirvana, the absence of greed, anger, delusion, those three fires, and so you're no longer caught in the cycle of birth and death, they're both looked at as inherently empty. And so it's a very deep concept right there. But basically what we're saying is, remember I gave that example of that firefighter going in and out of that burning house, right? Think about it this way. A fully awakened, enlightened Bodhisattva or Buddha, they are in non-abiding nirvana. So they can, these concepts of even samsara and nirvana, they even go away. So that can really just, make your mind explode. Like, really? What we've all heard nirvana and samsara, rebirth. So these concepts just fall away, because now this fully awakened Buddha and or Bodhisattva can do what they essentially want to do. They've achieved this level of attainment. So basically, they can go in and out of that burning house whenever they want to. They're not going to be affected by it. They're not going to be singed. They're not going to be smoke inhalation, burned, whatever like that. They can go in and out whenever they want to, because really, that fire no longer exists for them. Is an empty concept. So basically, cycle of birth and death, samsara, dukkha, nirvana, all those concepts go away, they're existing really this higher realization, this higher level. So they can go inside that burning house. And so all of us are what we call, are basically called dharmas. Not like dharma, but dharmas. And so basically we're phenomena. So really, it goes back into that concept of non-self the Buddha taught. We don't have a permanent, everlasting, independent self. That includes all phenomena, including us. So even though these Bodhisattva and Buddhas are there to save all sentient beings from suffering, dukkha, really, there's no real sentient beings to really save, if that makes sense. But we exist right now, the five aggregates. We are this combination of things, temporary grouping of things, so we do exist and we do have dukkha. So that's why they're going in and out of that house, or existing in that house, without being affected by the quote-unquote flames that really don't even exist for that particular enlightened being. So on the Bodhisattva path, a practitioner, whether you're a brand new Buddhist, inside Mahayana, or been there for a long time, whether that's just attending ceremonies, or you've helped volunteering, or you're just whatever part you're on the path, you're a Bodhisattva. So it's a little bit different than saying, well, just like these awakened, enlightened Bodhisattvas we see in all the imagery inside Mahayana Buddhism, all these different types of like celestial Bodhisattvas. We're talking about anybody on the path is a Bodhisattva. Those on the Arhatship path, that's a path. Those on the Bodhisattva path are on a path. So they're all paths, but the goal is essentially the same. We're all going to eventually become Buddhas, fully awakened beings. So that's really, really the goal. Now, so there's different, there's a vow that's taken by those who want to actually formally go on the Bodhisattva path. And also there's even a ceremony for those in Mahayana to actually do this. But essentially, there's different vows, but then there's also different essentially lands or levels that we go into as we progress on the Bodhisattva path. And the goal is to really have these paramitas or perfections. So there's essentially traditionally 6, but there's actually 4 more too, so it's really 10. But basically these perfections, as we perfect them through countless lifetimes, basically they are making us get closer and closer and closer to being an awakened and enlightened Bodhisattva. And then from there on to becoming a Buddha, because the end goal, if there's going to be a goal, is full Buddhahood, to become a Buddha. And for a lot of us, that really blows our mind, because we just usually think of just like one Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha. But there were Buddhas before Shakyamuni, and there's going to be Buddhas after Shakyamuni. And that's even recognized inside Theravada. But the concept is, wait a minute, these billions of people on our planet alone. Remember, Buddhist cosmology is not reserved to our planet, but just our planet alone. We're all going to become Buddhists? Yeah, but our concept of time is really limited by, the couple of decades we have on this earth. And so our existence is very, very narrowed, and our view of time is very narrow, but it doesn't really exist in the real fundamental way. So when we're looking at the Bodhisattva path, we may go looking, wow, there's going to take eons, or just like all these lifetimes. The Buddha did it. Others have done it as well too. We just can't grasp that concept of time. But when you're on the path, it starts to fall away. Because remember, we are not being reincarnated, it's rebirth. So it's our karma, it's our intentions. That's what's going on, not the temporary condition thing right now, the 5 aggregates, what's called you right now and me. We are just temporary beings right now. So it's going to be our actions and our intentions that continue on. So that's continuing on throughout all these lifetimes, right? But it's building and building and building and building. So a future incarnation is able to become a fully awakened Bodhisattva, and then eventually a fully awakened Buddha. And so does it mean that they exist on this world? Not necessarily. So as these Bodhisattvas get higher in attainment, they can actually, all those perfections, remember, they attain the perfections, they can now actually specify their rebirth, like where they're going to be reborn into. And so it's more control, if you will, over samsara to that degree. But basically, they can actually determine where they're going to be born into. And so that's really where we see, like even Shakyamuni Buddha, before he became Siddhartha Gautama and born into this world right now, he was actually inside a celestial heaven, if you will, inside Buddhism. And because he was a bodhisattva all these prior existences. Then he directed himself, okay, this is going to be the world I'm going to be reborn into, and this is where I'm going to become a Buddha. So he actually directed his rebirth, if you think about it that way, because he attained that level of attainment on that Bodhisattva path. So when we look at it from our conventional life right now, even for me, it's like, wow, that's an extremely long time to be on this Bodhisattva path. Wouldn't it just be simpler to go arhatship? Yeah, you can absolutely do that. There's nothing wrong with that path. Theravada is a great tradition as well. Just inside Mahayana, it was really designed for laypersons primarily. So just not, for example, like in Theravada, where yes, you can become enlightened as a layperson, but it's more unlikely. It's like you really got to be a monastic to really progress on. You got to be like all in basically, because that's really the lifestyle, the religious lifestyle. To attain it that way, it's following very closely to what we saw was the Buddhist disciples who became arhats. Whereas inside Mahayana, it's more populist type teaching, if you will, or practice, where it's like not just monastic, everyone is actually on a Bodhisattva path. And so in that way, what we do in this life, the conduct, morality we do, how we help people, the compassion, all that, which we also can find inside Theravada, but here we're doing it because the goal is just not for personal salvation, it's going to be salvation for all, which is also can really make your mind explode like, well, that's an extremely big concept. But that those concepts and that level of time sift away as you attain these higher perfections, you start perfecting everything. And so just like even like the Buddha, he could have in prior existence, like, this is the level I want to attain, I'm done. He could have. And even for the future Buddha, same deal, but we're going to have a future Buddha as well, and Buddhas beyond him. So if we really think about it that way, when we start developing these perfections and this aspiration for awakening, which is really the hallmark of a bodhisattva, this aspiration for awakening to become a fully awakened Buddha is where they're driving towards. They never lose that. That's what's really important, because that's born out of this huge sense of compassion for all sentient beings, to save them all, to help them all. And so, yes, that can sound very, again, aspirational. You know what? That's a vow. That's a mindset, that's bodhicitta, to get us on that path. So when they're on this path, you think about it this way: the belief in self, that ego we have, and everything else, that falls away. And so what's left? Bodhicitta. That's continuing on. So the desire, like, take a couple of years, okay, it's not even a concern anymore, because that sense of self has just gone away, and this is overridden. And as they help more and more sentient beings, they progress on as well too. So it's very much a mission. If you think about it this way, it's a mission of these bodhisattvas, whether they are unenlightened, ordinary bodhisattvas like you and me, or an awakened enlightened bodhisattva. We're all on this path to help all other sentient beings out there. We're just on different levels of that particular path, because we all want to get to become a Buddha so we can also help all sentient beings. Right now, I'm far away from that. Maybe you are as well too. We're going to take countless lifetimes to do this, but we're gradually building that up, just like the Buddha did in his past lifetimes. There's past lifetimes where the prior Buddha, or Buddha Shakyamuni, I should say, in his prior lifetimes, where he did things that were great, small, you name it, as a bodhisattva, but it was a continuous effort, because he made a vow a long time ago to become a Buddha, and he did it. And so we can do it as well too. You just can't lose that aspiration for awakening, and you won't when you actually continue on the path. So that's where Mahayana is coming from. It's not necessarily saying that one tradition is better than the other, and at least in the Mahayana view. Doesn't matter if you go the arhatship or not, because eventually, at least the mindset is, you're eventually going to become a Buddha at some prior future time. At least that's the belief. Now, in Mahayana, it is skipping arhatship. It's going straight on the bodhisattva path, just because they're looking at it this way. And this is just purely the view that we're not going to stop here, because our goal is not arhatship, is to become a Buddha. So we want to progress on a bodhisattva path, just like the Buddha did. So it's a little bit different. We looked at, as I mentioned earlier on, the Buddhist disciples. He had them on the arhatship path. That's what he did. I kind of look at it this way. Remember that house on fire? I also look at him, maybe the Buddha, as remember he's also called a great physician. It's almost like a a doctor inside like an emergency room. He's got people coming in with horrible injuries and stuff, right? He's got to do the best he can right now, our hardship, and that's what he did, and that it was incredible what he did, and this tradition that continues on to this day. Now, overall, he wants to make sure that people continue on to become, guess what? Doctors just like himself, to save other people, or even not doctors, maybe nurse practitioners or physician's assistants or specialists, or whatever you want to call it, bodhisattvas. All of us are helping. Now, did they want to get to become a Buddha as well too? Absolutely, but we're all helping in different ways. Or even the other people that work in a hospital, unenlightened, ordinary bodhisattvas, doing all the other stuff that makes everything work to help heal and to help people. Yes, so look at it that way. It's just different path to the same goal. And even aside, again, Theravada, the goal is, yes, absolutely, it would be fantastic for us all to get to become a Buddha on that Bodhisattva path, become Bodhisattvas. That's all recognized as well. So no matter what tradition that you're following, you're going to be in the right tradition. Don't worry about that. I've always loved the Bodhisattva path inside Mahayana, what drew me to it. It can look very overwhelming and even mind-blowing, again, to use that example, like, wait a minute, that's going to be a long time, but as you progress in and as you start practicing Buddhism, especially the Bodhisattva path, it's very inspiring. It's very, of course, faithful, but you're going to find that you have compassion in all these different traditions, right? It's just a path towards that same goal. We just want to become Buddhas in an eventual future time frame. And we're going to get there on the Bodhisattva path, becoming Bodhisattvas, becoming Buddhas. Do you have any questions, comments, or anything that you want to impart regarding the Bodhisattva path? I'd like to hear from you in the comments below. Thank you.